Presentation of divorce options in Wisconsin, which has the name Second Saturday because it occurs on the second Saturday of most months. It is presented by the Collaborative Foundation of Wisconsin and the Collaborative Family Law Council of Wisconsin. And I'm going to share my screen now so you can see the slides here. But before I do that, I want to call your attention to some of the features of Zoom and the webinar so that you can ask questions. At the bottom of your screen, and you won't see it unless you put your mouse over it, you'll see all the controls. There's one of them will be labeled chat, and the other will be labeled Q&A. And you can actually use either one of those. The chat's probably the easiest. If you open the chat window, you'll see a message from our executive director, Brian Jensen, which says, as webinar attendees need to ask questions via the chat box, thanks. So we will, you can type whatever you'd like in there, and at any time if you have questions, I'll keep my eye on that, and that'll be your way of telling me to either go over something again or slow down, or if you have a specific question, you can ask it there and I'll answer it as it comes in. All right, so as I said, I will share my screen and you can see the presentation. My face will get a little smaller here. All right, I'm just going to rearrange things so I can see them a little bit better. All right, there we go. So as I said, this is a presentation of divorce options in Wisconsin, second Saturday, because it's on the second Saturday of most months. And it is put on by the Collaborative Foundation of Wisconsin and the Collaborative Family Law Council of Wisconsin. I'll explain those in a little slide a little later on, but those are the two organizations in Wisconsin that are dedicated to collaborative divorce, which is one of the things that I'll be spending most of the time on here in this presentation. And as I said, we are the Collaborative Foundation of Wisconsin and the Collaborative Family Law Council of Wisconsin. I'm on the board of the organization on the left, and I'm also on the board of the organization on the right. I just completed my term as chair of the Collaborative Family Law Council of Wisconsin yesterday, I believe, no, 2 days ago. Oh, and one other thing, if you have questions either during this chat or after, or during this webinar or after, you can send them to this email address, info@collabwis.org. And I'm just going to type that in the chat so you can see it after this slide goes away. .org. There we go. All right, so either during this presentation or afterwards, you can ask any questions there. All right, so first some basics. Wisconsin, as you may or may not have heard, is a no-fault divorce state. What that means is that the only thing that needs to be shown, along with some other statutory requirements, is that the marriage is irretrievably broken. And that really merely needs to be alleged by one party. So you don't even have to agree on that. So almost, I believe all states in the United States are no-fault divorce states with similar requirements. And divorce ends a marriage. You may have heard of legal separation, but that is everything in a divorce up to the point where the marriage is ended. It is very, very similar. As a matter of fact, uses all the same forms. There's just a checkbox at the top. One says divorce, the other says legal separation. And they're legally very similar up until the point where with a legal separation, the marriage is not ended and the parties cannot remarry. And that's an alternative for religious or other reasons. It used to be a reason for reasons of health insurance, not so much anymore, but a professional can explain those options to you. But the way a divorce begins is that you file a petition for a divorce. You're asking the court to do something. You're asking the court to issue a judgment of divorce, and you do that with something called a petition. That starts a legal process. That legal process is the same in every divorce, no matter how you choose to do it. But a divorce can follow many paths based on starting at a petition and ending with a final judgment. There's a lot of different ways that can go, and we'll explain some of the categories of those different paths in this presentation. An attorney cannot represent both spouses in a divorce under any circumstances. And that is because in a divorce, you're assumed to have opposite, well, maybe not opposite, but you're assumed to have different ideas on at least some substantive topics. And a lawyer can't represent different ideas about substantive topics. They can only represent one. So that's why in Wisconsin and in, I think, every state, an attorney cannot represent both spouses in a divorce. It's not an exception, but there's an alternative if the attorney is also a mediator, which I'll go into later on. And then there's some residential requirements. You have to have been a Wisconsin resident for at least 6 months. And then there's a waiting period of 120 days after you file a petition. Then you can't have a final hearing sooner than 4 months. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are 4 distinct paths from a petition to a final judgment of divorce. And the first is to do it yourself. The Latin phrase for that you may have heard is pro se, which means for yourself. It's very common. A lot of people choose this in the state of Wisconsin because it seems easy and it seems inexpensive. In some cases it is. The word easy is a little misleading because it depends on your comfort and your understanding of the forms, because you have to use the standard forms, like the standard petition. You have to download those and you have to fill out that. You have to fill out a whole bunch of other forms. And if you're okay with the forms, then it's not that hard, but there's no instructions because they're meant to be filled out by attorneys. So the instructions are a law degree. So you might run into things on those forms that confuse you. And there's ways around that. For example, you can hire a lawyer as a consultant for you to help you fill out the forms. And that looks to the court like you're doing it yourself, but really there's an attorney there that's helping you understand the forms. They can only do that for one of the parties, but that is an option to hire an attorney as a consultant. It tends to work best for parties where there's not a lot of assets, there's not a lot of debt, there's no children. But one of the penalties of a do-it-yourself divorce is that you could run into post-judgment issues more easily. And post-judgment means after the judgment of divorce. So after the judgment of divorce, you may find that someone made a mistake or you both made a mistake because you didn't understand something or you missed something. And you've got to fix that mistake. Well, fixing a mistake is always harder. And you may actually have to hire attorneys to help you fix the mistake because you may not agree on how to fix the mistake. Post-judgment issues tend to be more expensive. They tend to be more contentious. And they sometimes are a little bit uglier than the original divorce itself. So post-judgment issues are always a possibility when you do it yourself, especially if you've received no assistance during the process. The second major path is mediation. And as I mentioned, I am a mediator. Maybe I didn't mention that, but I am an attorney. I'm a family law attorney. I'm also a family law mediator. And what that means is that I can serve parties not as an attorney. I can't do both at the same time. But as a mediator, I can help divorcing parties have good conversations. I can help them through the process, and I can educate them about the law. I can educate them about the procedure. I cannot give them legal advice. So if anybody asks me a should I question, well, what do you recommend? I can't do any of that as a mediator. I can't act as a lawyer and then as a mediator in the same situation. I have to pick one or the other and stick with it. So one of the I would say, I was about to say problem, but one of the issues with mediation in Wisconsin is that there's no regulation of mediators in the state of Wisconsin. There are classes that you can take to be better mediators, but there's no there's nothing like the State Bar of Wisconsin, which gives and regulates lawyers. They discipline lawyers when they don't do the right thing, and they issue law licenses, and they make sure that you're keeping up with legal education, things like that. Nothing like that exists for mediators in Wisconsin. And so if you just go to a mediator, you don't, unless you go to somebody that is recommended by a friend or somebody, you don't really know what their expertise level is. And an exception to that is a mediator that's also an attorney, because then you at least know that that mediator has a law degree and they went through a process to get it, and that they are at least also regulated by the State Bar of Wisconsin. One of the aspects of mediation that can be good is that the parties set the pace. And that can be good, it can be bad, but if you want to be in control, more control of the process, and you think you can use an impartial third party that's not giving any legal advice at all, then mediation might be a good option for you. If you're able to have good conversations with your spouse, if you're able to trust each other, that you're being that the other is being honest when they're submitting financial information, then mediation might be an option for you. If those things are a little harder for you, then there are other options. There is the traditional litigation option, which is a legal process involving attorneys, and it's adversarial in that there's no trust inherent in the process. The third-party decision maker, the judge or the commissioner, is the one that enforces fairness in the process. And ultimately, unless there's a settlement, the third-party decision maker, the judge or commissioner, decides all the issues, the division of assets and child support. It can be confrontational. Just being in a courtroom makes people confrontational. Right now, we're doing things by Zoom, but even that is also sort of confrontational. And the court dictates the pace. You're dealing with the court's calendar in that case. And then our fourth option that we'll spend most of our time on today is collaborative practice, collaborative divorce. Collaborative has some of the aspects of mediation in the sense that the users or the parties set the pace of how things go, but it uses more than an impartial third-party mediator. It uses a team-based concept where we use an attorney for each party, but we also use mental health professionals and financial professionals as neutrals to help bring other sorts of viewpoints and expertise to the situation. And what that does is it helps parties have good conversations with a lot of support. And it also is an out-of-court process. We only go to the final hearing. We don't spend any other time in court. So we'll spend the rest of our time talking about collaborative today. Collaborative has a number of core principles. The first is something called a participation agreement. An agreement is a written contract. And the contract is really what makes the case a collaborative case. You're entering into a set of principles that are made a court order, so you have to abide by them, that define what collaborative is and sets it apart from a traditional litigated case, and even sets it apart from a mediated case. And we'll go into the details of that participation agreement in a little bit. Well, actually right now. The required participation agreement requires disclosure, transparency. It requires the parties to negotiate in good faith, but more importantly, controls how the process can terminate. It's a voluntary process, so either party can withdraw from it at any time. But if you do, the team, the professional team that was helping you, has to withdraw. And that seems harsh, but it's important, because when people choose to go into a collaborative process with a requirement for transparency, putting everything on the table, negotiating in good faith, we create a bubble around that by saying, well, you can't just start the divorce that way, learn all kinds of information in this protective bubble of collaboration, and then shift to an adversarial litigated model with the same attorneys and just continue on there. It's not good faith. So what we do is we make sure that if a collaborative process ends, and then the team cannot continue in that adversarial process. You're going to be beginning, well, not necessarily beginning again, but you'll be continuing the process with different adversarial lawyers. And like I said, in a collaborative case, one of our core principles is that we don't go into court in any kind of adversarial posture, and that the team is disqualified from litigation through the participation agreement. What that means is litigation is something that would continue outside the collaborative process. And everything's on the table. I think I mentioned that the participation agreement requires transparency and honesty. Well, what that means is that normally, if I was in a litigation, I would not have a duty to disclose everything that my client might have. In other words, there's a process called discovery where you ask for that and you demand it in a litigated process. We don't do discovery in collaborative. That participation agreement requires me and the other attorney to proactively put things on the table. So all the financial information, all of the interests and things like that, we want to put everything on the table so that a free and open and honest discussion of the issues can take place, and we can do some creative problem solving. Well, you might think, why would I want to do that? That sounds like a disadvantage. Well, in the end, discovery in a family context is pretty expansive. And so discovery usually just delays things because in the discovery process, the financial information is going to come out anyway. And some lawyers kind of enjoy holding back information until they're forced to disclose it. But really, in most family situations, all it does is delay the divorce, make things more traumatic, make it longer, make it more expensive, and it's kind of a waste of time. So in most family situations. So in collaborative, we just put everything on the table from the beginning and we begin from that standpoint. Also, in a traditional divorce, it's the parties, according to the court, are the divorcing couple, and then the minor children are under the jurisdiction of the court. So grandparents, adult children, maybe there's a cousin that's very involved with the family. You can have all sorts of different alternative family arrangements that a traditional divorce in the divorce statute doesn't cover. So in collaborative, we put everyone and their interests, by choice. In other words, if you say to your collaborative team, well, I want to consider the interests of the grandparents, then that comes in. Then they their interests then are represented at the table and can be part of the final settlement. So we can be more creative in how to do that. We summarize the collaborative process. I see we have a question. So before I begin on that, I'm going to answer this question. Can collaborative work if one party is being dishonest with finances, i.e. withholding account balance and account information? Well, the answer is yes and no, in the sense that a collaborative lawyer cannot continue in a collaborative process if their client tells them, this bank account exists, but I don't want you to disclose it. So the participation agreement and my ethics would require me and any other collaboratively trained lawyer to say to their client, look, I can't do that. If you insist on me doing that, then I have to withdraw from the process. So in that sense, that tends to communicate to the client that, hey, this is not what we do in collaborative. And usually there's a change of heart. Um, I usually have those kinds of conversations with clients before they begin the collaborative process, so they understand that when I have that conversation, that's usually the second or third time I've had that conversation, and they understand that the expectation is that we're voluntarily and freely disclosing financial information. Because like I said, in discovery, that account's going to be found anyway, because they can directly subpoena banks and things like that. So it's kind of a waste of time. All right, so summary of the collaborative process. It's really like an inverted funnel. And we begin at the wide mouth of the funnel with establishing the framework. We're deciding what collaborative process to use. We have some choices there. We're deciding who we want on our team. And then we start gathering information. We talk about the parties' interests, their values, what they need. In other words, what are their plans after the final judgment of divorce? Do they want to go back to school? Do they want to move? Do they want to maybe work on restructuring their life in another way? So we share that, and that comes into the process. And then we enter into problem solving, where we come up with settlement options. And our financial neutrals, are really good at coming up with creative settlement options from the financial standpoint, particularly with what to do with retirement assets. And then we negotiate, and we come up with different types of solutions, and that all gets completed into a settlement agreement. We submit the settlement agreement to the court, and then there's a final court hearing. And that's the final pointy end of the funnel. I should say, you notice at no point is there any circles, or do we go back up the funnel? We're always working towards settlement. That's the way that a collaborative works. It's also the way mediation works. Is settlement is the goal. Going to court's not the goal. It's not even a possible goal. And so we're only doing one thing. We're only going to the settlement. That's all we're doing. All right, so I mentioned collaborative being in a team, and team implies that there's multiple people. What that means is that there's different professionals that provide different expertise as part of the collaborative team, in addition to the divorcing couple. And we have a number of different models. And I'm going to use the term neutral. And what that means is a professional team member that is not aligned to one party or another. They're neutral. They're providing services to both without favor or influence to either one. And that's more efficient, because given that the goal is settlement, then the parties have a unified interest in settlement. So we can use neutrals like coaches, child specialists, financial neutrals, and it's more efficient because their fees are then paid. There's only one fee. The fees are split, in other words. And they can provide a great deal of the collaborative process and not duplicate work done by the attorneys. The attorneys can do what they do for representing each party, and then the neutrals do what they do without overlap, and it can be more efficient. And the type of teams that we use and the configuration depends on the situation. We have where collaborative started, which is the two-coach model 20 years ago, which is still appropriate in some cases now, where there's each party has an attorney, but each party also has a mental health coach. And the coach helps with different types of issues for the party. They help with coping issues. They help with sometimes motivation, in the sense that sometimes parties get tired in the process, and it can help move them along. They might have some individual concerns that make their own coach more necessary. We can also do a single coach model where there's an attorney for each party, but instead of a coach for each party, we have a neutral coach. And that neutral coach is also a mental health specialist, but they meet jointly with both parties together, and they help monitor and provide feedback to the rest of the team on how the mental health of the parties is going. And that's not a small concern, because I'm an attorney, and so I often think of divorce as a legal process, but I don't think most people think of it that way. They think of it as kind of a traumatic, difficult mental health process, and because it really is. It's primarily a mental health process. It's a shifting of mindset. You know, you're ending one part of your life and you're beginning another, and that's a difficult shift to make. It can be easier if you have somebody to help you coach through it, in addition to the legal issues and the financial issues. So the coach is really for that. And then we have another model that's kind of an evolution of the single coach model, where that single coach also acts as a facilitator, where they're attending all the meetings. They are providing a kind of a consistent through point for the parties. So they always know that that facilitator is going to be there. That facilitator kind of keeps track of the agendas of the meetings and helps keep the process moving forward in a more active way than if they were just a single neutral coach. And we're just about to go through a little bit more about what I was just talking about. In the facilitator model, as a single neutral that acts as a facilitator, I guess case manager sometimes is the phrase that's used. They organize meetings, and they help workflow. Essentially, there's a lot of paperwork and scheduling. Scheduling is a thing because we do everything in meetings. So we have to send around emails or other methods to try to schedule meetings with people. And the facilitator really helps a lot with that. All right, so I'm going to start filling the screen here with the rest of the collaborative team. Like I said, collaborative team also always involves two attorneys, collaboratively trained attorneys. And they do what attorneys are best for. They provide legal advice to their clients, but they also draft all the legal documents. They are communication to the court. They file things with the court. They come up with realistic settlements that can be approved by the court, because there still are some statutory requirements that need to be satisfied in order for a court to approve a final settlement of divorce. And the attorneys will know what that is. But the attorneys really stick to what the attorneys do best and are trained for. The other parties, or the other professional team members, are doing what they're trained for and they're best at. Like I mentioned, there's coaches, and I mentioned all the different models of coaching. I haven't mentioned a child specialist, or in some states, family specialist. These are also mental health specialists, and they're also neutrals, but their role is to meet with the children and give the children a voice at the table. So in other words, we don't bring children into the negotiation or any of the meetings. We bring the child specialist in. The child specialist is an expert in child development, and the way that children are affected by divorce, and they can provide that voice into the settlement to educate everybody about any needs of the children. Sometimes we talk about special needs, but even not to that level. Children can have needs, temperaments, different situations, the different ages of the children and how that's going to affect things, maybe specific circumstances like special needs or learning disabilities, or even just frustration issues, things that the children are going through. All that can be brought to the team through the child specialists. They're extremely valuable. And then financial neutrals, they do what they do. The financial neutrals bring an expertise that is unlike anybody else on the screen here. Attorneys are not good financial specialists, and mental health specialists don't do any of that either. They come up with creative solutions. They're usually experts in retirement plans, retirement accounts, all the different regulations for ERISA plans and non-ERISA plans, and all these things that I just understand kind of at a tiny little level, but they're expert at. They're extremely valuable to help the parties compile financial documents, prepare financial disclosures, and educate the team about future financial impacts, like for example, saving for college, different ways that you can do that now that you're divorced, things like that. Oh, and we have another question, which I'll answer because it deals with the child specialist. Can there be adult children in their 20s for the specialist? And the answer is yes. In a litigated model, you may have heard something like there's a term called guardian ad litem, or GAL, and those are appointed for minor children. You don't get GALs in litigated cases appointed for adult children. It's not the option here. We're not going to court here. The child specialist can represent adult children. No problem at all. I'm doing a case right now where that is exactly the case. There's one minor child, 17. The other children are in their 20s. They're affected by the divorce just the same as the 17-year-old. In collaborative, they have a place at the table through the child specialist, and that's I won't say very common, but it definitely happens, and is very welcome in the process. All right, so people ask at this point about cost usually, because I just showed you a diagram where there's multiple professionals, not just an attorney, and you may think that hiring an attorney just by itself is going to be expensive, and we're adding all these other professionals to it. Isn't that going to be more expensive? Well, the answer is yes, more expensive than not hiring them and doing it yourself. But that's probably obvious. The thing that makes collaborative more powerful and can make collaborative more efficient is that we avoid duplicating things. In a litigated divorce, you're going to be hiring your attorney, who's going to be in an adversarial stance and is going to have to do more work because they're in an adversarial stance. They're trying to prepare for every circumstance. They're doing discovery and things like that. That's more expensive, but you're also hiring subject matter experts. Maybe you want to hire a vocational expert to testify about your spouse's ability to earn more than they're making. That's going to be expensive because you have to get them to testify, and they charge for that. Maybe you need to hire a financial expert to testify about your spouse's business and how their business should be valued, and how their business income should be part of available income available for child support, things like that. That's going to be expensive. And there's a lot of duplication because if you hire an expert, the other party's going to hire an expert to testify exactly the opposite. And so you've hired two experts to fight each other in court, and you're paying double the amount. That's a lot of duplication. We eliminate all that in collaborative. We use neutrals. We only get one perspective because they're working for both of you, and we put everything on the table. It's more collaborative can be more efficient in that way. We can also have a lot of advantages because we can be more creative because we're not under the threat of going to trial. We can toss ideas out on the table. We can make suggestions and have open and free discussion, and come up with more creative solutions than definitely could be done in a litigation context. And it also tends to have better quality outcomes, and we know that from survey results, in the sense that people who go through collaborative tend to be a little bit more satisfied about their outcome down the road, in particular, their relationship with the children. It's hard to quantify that, and we are always looking at better ways to research that. We have, I think everybody that practices collaborative has a lot of stories and can tell you about situations where collaborative has resulted in more healthy relationships with children down the road because of the process you went through was a little bit more calm, was a little bit more centered on everyone's mental health and well-being than a litigated case. Oh yes, we want to compare. I've been comparing all along collaborative with litigation, but what this slide does is quantify a little bit more in the sense that the collaborative team and litigation, there we go. And this on the right is a representation of all the different experts that you're going to end up hiring in litigation that maybe you don't see on the front end. Like the GAL, there's a deposit for the GAL. The court will appoint a GAL if you have minor children. You don't have a choice for that. You have to pay them whether you want to or not. In some states, some counties in Wisconsin, they also appoint a social worker to do a placement study. You have to pay for that as well. But then we have, therapists, There can be in depositions, when you're asking questions of the spouse, there has to be support staff. You have to hire a court reporter. They charge you a lot of money to transcribe what's said there over hours of talking. It can be child psychologists that you pay, investigators that you pay in order to find out information. All these things are sort of surprises because you have to hire them as they come up. We also don't have on there like assessors, people who go out and value property like real estate or personal property, boats, things like that. You have to pay those people. You don't maybe see that on the front end. With collaborative, you're hiring all this team right in the beginning, and so you understand. We typically don't expand the team afterwards while the process is going on. The team is what it is, and we work within that team. In litigation, you tend to begin with attorneys, and you're just adding people, and the bill just gets more and more. And to sum up, there are advantages to collaborative. Self-determination and control is a big part of it. You're at the table, you're at all the meetings. There's very little that's occurring in the shadows without you. Everything's open and transparent. You can see everything. You see all the documents. There's nothing submitted to court that is in a court file that you can't see. We use experts for what they're good for. And this is a cliche, but when things go to court, there's typically a winner and a loser. And that's why people choose a court to make a decision. You're saying, Judge, I want to win and I want my spouse to lose. And that's when you go to litigation, that's kind of what you're asking the court to do, because they have to pick. They also sometimes have a way of picking so that both of you lose, and no one's happy. But court tends to have this win-lose mindset. When you go into collaborative and even mediation, it's possible to come up with solutions where there's wins for both of you. It's not the same win, that doesn't make sense, but you can have things that you value that maybe you value more and your spouse values a different thing in a little way, and you can figure out a creative way so that both of you have some degree of win. And you can both walk away from the settlement thinking, yep, I can live with that. That's something that is doable for me, and the other party feels the same. So you're not going away from a collaborative process thinking I lost. The other part about collaborative is that it's private. You're not going to court, and so you're not having. If you go to CCAP, you can see if somebody goes to a hearing, the court clerk will write sometimes notes, and depending on the clerk, those notes can be detailed or not that detailed. You can generally tell if you look at CCAP, which is if you're not familiar, is a database that the state court system maintains of every court action in the state of Wisconsin. You can look them up by name, by county, by case number, and you can see the progress in other people's divorces. In collaborative, you'll see that we filed the petition, and then you'll see that we filed the settlement, and that there was a final hearing and a judgment was granted. That's it. That's all you see in a collaborative case. So it also tends to be a little bit more dignified in that way. We're not airing all sorts of things in open court. All right, so I talked about the different types of collaborative team members. We have a type of member that I haven't talked about, and there's affiliates. These are not people who are at the table with you as part of the professional team, but they are professionals that are sort of on the sidelines in the background and helping the parties with specific things, like, for example, real estate agents, because sometimes real estate needs to be sold. Sometimes somebody wants to buy a house in the process, and you need to buy a house. You need to get a mortgage. You need to refinance a mortgage. We have mortgage providers. We have financial advisors that can do specialized financial advice that our financial neutrals cannot do. And Baldrige College Solutions, for example, does something very specific, very valuable. They advise people on how a divorce can affect your college savings plans and how you can preserve some of those college savings plans through a divorce. Because there are choices you can make in a divorce financially that can kind of destroy your college savings plans, and Baldrige can help us understand as a financial team or as a professional team, how to make choices that preserve those options as best we can. And I began this with talking about the two organizations that are presenting this. The main organization that's presenting this is the Collaborative Foundation of Wisconsin. And I'm on the board of that. It's a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization. And that organization offers collaborative divorce services to families that are facing financial challenges or have a greater financial need. We only do collaborative divorce. There's an application process if you go to collabwis.org. There's, depending on the financial situation, it's either no cost or a sliding scale, low cost option. We don't guarantee acceptance, but we do go through and examine every single case. And as a board, I know I sit in those meetings. We try to provide as much help as we can to everybody that we are able. And the other, that's by the way, our website, collabwis.org. And then the other organization that I just finished my term as chair is Collaborative Family Law Council of Wisconsin, or CFLCW. That's also a nonprofit, but it's a C6 trade group. And that's an organization of all the professionals that we talked about that have been trained in collaborative divorce: attorneys, mental health specialists, financial specialists, and all of our affiliates that help us do collaborative divorce in the state of Wisconsin. It's a statewide group. It's about 225 members. It's very, I can say this as the just finished chair. It's an organization I'm very proud of. It's a very strong organization. We talk about collaborative divorce a lot and how we can make it better. That's the other organization that is helping put this on today. This is the front page of the website, and the arrow is pointing to find a professional, which it can lead you to this geographic map, and you can see like the little scales there are lawyers, and then there's other icons for financial neutrals and for financial specialists. I don't think I mentioned my name. My name is Robert Arthur, and I am a member of CFLCW, and I'm on this map somewhere. My office is in downtown Milwaukee, so I'm in this cluster of lawyers that's down here. I also have an office in Appleton, and I'm not using either office right now. I'm using Zoom, but those are my geographic areas, is the Milwaukee area and the Fox Valley generally. All right, well, I want to thank you. I'm just going to check. And the divorce, the two websites are there. Collabdivorce.com is the website for CFLCW, the trade industry group where you can find professionals to help you. And then collabwis.org is the website for the Collaborative Foundation of Wisconsin, and that's for low-cost parties, low-cost collaborative divorce for parties in financial need. So we want to thank you for viewing this presentation, taking time out of your Saturday to watch this, to ask questions. I'm going to check one more time, see if we have any questions in either Q&A or chat, and we do not. If, there we go. How do you go about assembling your team? Well, that happens generally after you've contacted one financial professional or one collaborative professional. Let's say you find a collaborative attorney and you talk to them about your interest in collaborative divorce. And then your spouse also decides to pursue collaborative divorce. Then it kind of depends on the circumstance, but what we do is we can give you recommendations for specific professionals. We can talk to you about what sort of things you value, because there might be some sort of things like, for example, maybe you are in a specific circumstance that makes one of our financial professionals more applicable than another. And the attorneys or all of us would know, because we spend a lot of time interacting with all the other members. So we kind of know each other's strengths, and we can help you find people that you like. But we start assembling the team, and you agree. You say, yeah, that's a good person. We'd like to hire them. We invite them to the team. They accept, and then they're part of the team. So that's how we assemble the team. All right, so if you have any continuing questions, I'm continuing to watch here, but there's that email address, info@collabwith.org, and that will go to somebody who will either answer the question or to steer it to somebody who will. All right, so we're a little over 45 minutes. That was the time that we had budgeted for today. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you for your questions. And if you have any other questions, just send us an email or contact one of our professionals to help you further. Thank you.